Cade Rourke thought he was getting a quiet widow nobody wanted, a business arrangement to keep the bank from taking everything. What he got was a woman with a trunk full of secrets and armed men willing to murder for what she carried. Before you find out why powerful men want her dead and what Cade just brought into his home, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you how it all started. The Wire came on a Tuesday. Cade Rourke stood in the barn, pitchfork in hand, staring at the telegram like it might catch fire. Behind him, his nephew Danny was supposed to be mucking stalls. Instead, the kid was launching dried horse apples at the cat. "You hit smoke one more time. You're sleeping in here tonight," Cade said without turning around. The throwing stopped. Cade read the telegram again. Same words, same problem. Marriage license approved. Stop. Bride arrives Friday. Depot. Stop. Reverend booked Saturday noon. Stop. 4 days. He had 4 days before a woman he'd never met became his wife. He folded the paper and shoved it in his pocket. His hands smelled like hay and horse sweat. He was 31 years old, owned 200 acres of scrubland and drought, and was about to marry for the stupidest reason a man could, because a banker said so. "Uncle Cade?" He turned. Danny stood there, 10 years old, all elbows and dirt, holding the pitchfork upside down. "That's not how you hold it." "I know." Danny flipped it around, stabbed at the straw pile, missed. "Sarah says you're getting married." "Sarah talks too much." "She says the lady's fat." Cade took the pitchfork from him. "Your sister doesn't know what she's talking about." "So she's not fat?" "I don't know what she is. I've never seen her." Danny's face scrunched up like he'd bit into something sour. "Then why are you marrying her?" Cade stabbed the fork into the ground and left it standing there. "Because if I don't, the bank takes the ranch. And if the bank takes the ranch, you and Sarah got nowhere to go." The kid went quiet. That happened when you reminded him his parents were dead. Cade regretted it immediately. "Go get washed up for supper." Danny didn't move. "What if she's mean?" "Then we'll deal with it." "What if she doesn't like us?" "She doesn't have to like you. She just has to be here." Cade pulled the telegram out again, smoothed it against his leg. "Now go, and tell your sister to stop listening at doors." Danny ran. The barn settled back into its familiar sounds, horses shifting weight, barn swallows overhead, the wind working its way through gaps in the boards. Cade looked at the telegram one more time, then struck a match and watched it burn. But the bank had given him 60 days. That was 2 months ago. The loan was 3 years old, taken out when his brother was still alive, when the ranch ran cattle and the creek didn't run dry every August. Back when there were 2 Rourke men to work the land instead of 1 man and 2 kids who still cried at night when they thought nobody heard. Cade had tried. He'd sold off half the herd, cut expenses, rode into town once a week to sit across from Franklin Schaefer, the bank manager, and explain why he needed more time. Schaefer always listened. He had that kind of face, sympathetic, patient, like he genuinely wanted to help. Then he'd say no. The 4th time Cade went in, Schaefer didn't even let him sit down. "There's a clause," Schaefer said, shuffling papers on his desk. "Section 7, subsection C. Did you read it when your brother signed?" "My brother's dead." "I'm aware. My condolences." Schaefer found the paper he wanted, turned it around, tapped a paragraph with his finger. "A single man cannot hold water rights on a homestead claim of this size. Territorial law. If you're unmarried by the end of the quarter, the rights revert to the county, and without water rights, the land's worthless." "Precisely." Cade stared at the paragraph, the words blurred together. "That's 2 weeks. 13 days, actually. I can't get married in 13 days. Schaefer leaned back in his chair. It creaked under him. Expensive leather, the kind that cost more than Cade made in 6 months. "Then I'll be filing the seizure paperwork on day 14. Cade's hands curled into fists on his knees. "You're telling me the only way to keep my land is to find a wife I don't have." "I'm telling you what the law says. The law's horseshit." "Perhaps." Schaefer smiled, thin and bloodless. "But it's still the law." Cade stood up. The chair scraped loud against the floor. "There's got to be another way." "There is." Schaefer opened a drawer, pulled out another piece of paper. I know a woman, widow, good character. She's looking for stability. You're pimping out widows now? I'm offering a solution. Schaefer slid the paper across the desk. A name was written at the top, Mara Hale. Below it, an address in Colmont, 60 miles south. She's aware of the arrangement. No expectations beyond the legal requirement. You marry her, you keep the ranch. Simple. Cade didn't touch the paper. What's wrong with her? Excuse me? If she's such a catch, why does she need a stranger to marry her? Schaefer's smile faded. Let's just say Mrs. Hale has had difficulties finding suitable placement, but her character is without question, and she understands the terms. Which are? Marriage in name, separate accommodations if you prefer. She keeps house, you keep the land. When the legal requirement is satisfied, you can dissolve it quietly. Cade looked at the name again. Mara Hale. He tried to picture her and couldn't. You said she's heavy built. I said she's had difficulties. That's what you meant, though. Schaefer didn't deny it. He just sat there, hands folded, waiting. Cade picked up the paper. I need time to think. You have 4 days. After that, I'm moving forward with seizure. You said 13. I need 9 days to process the paperwork. So unless you want me to start now. Schaefer let the sentence hang. Cade folded the paper, shoved it in his pocket. You're a real bastard, you know that? I'm a banker, Mr. Rourke. It's effectively the same thing. Cade sent the telegram that night. He didn't tell the kids, didn't tell anyone. Just rode into town after dark, handed the station clerk $1, and watched the message click its way down the wire toward Colmont. Proposal accepted, stop, arrive Friday, stop, Rourke. 3 days later, he was standing on the depot platform, hat in hand, trying not to sweat through his only clean shirt. The train was late. It was always late, but today it felt personal, like even the railroad knew this was a mistake and was giving him time to back out. He didn't back out. The train pulled in at 4:30, belching black smoke and steam. Cade watched passengers step down. A family with too much luggage, a salesman with a sample case, 2 cowboys already drunk. Then her. She was the last one off, not fat. That was the first thing he noticed. Schaefer had lied, or whoever told Schaefer had lied, or maybe Cade had just assumed wrong. She was solid, broad-shouldered, the kind of build that came from work, not idleness. Dark hair pulled back tight, simple dress, brown, practical. No jewelry except a thin ring on her right hand. And a trunk, a big one, reinforced corners, heavy enough that the porter was struggling with it. She looked at Cade. He looked at her. Neither of them smiled. Mrs. Hale? Mr. Rourke. Her voice was lower than he expected. Steady. She didn't look nervous, didn't look excited, didn't look much of anything. Cade gestured toward the wagon. I'll get your trunk. I'll help. She didn't wait for him to argue, just grabbed one handle while the porter took the other. Together, they hauled it off the platform and into the wagon bed. It hit the boards with a thud that made the whole wagon shake. What have you got in there? Cade asked. Rocks? Books. Books. I like to read. She said it flat, like she was daring him to make something of it. Cade didn't. He just paid the porter, helped her up onto the seat. She didn't need much help, and climbed up beside her. The ride out of town was quiet, too quiet. Cade kept trying to think of something to say, and coming up empty. What were you supposed to talk about with a woman you were marrying tomorrow? The weather, the ranch, the fact that this whole thing was a business arrangement and neither of them was fooling the other? Mara didn't seem bothered by the silence. She sat with her hands in her lap, watching the landscape roll past. Scrub grass, distant mountains, sky so big it made everything else feel small. They were a mile outside town when she finally spoke. Someone's following us. Cade's head snapped around. What? Behind us. 2 riders. They've been matching our pace since we left the depot. He twisted in his seat. Sure enough, there they were. 2 men on horseback, maybe a quarter-mile back, keeping steady distance. Probably just heading the same direction, Cade said. Probably. But she didn't sound convinced. And when Cade looked back again 5 minutes later, they were closer. Hold on, he said. He snapped the reins. The horses picked up speed, wagon rattling over the rough road. Mara grabbed the seat rail, didn't ask questions. The riders sped up too. Cade cursed under his breath. You know them? No. You sure? I'm sure. Then why the hell are they… The first shot cut him off. It wasn't close. Wasn't even aimed at them, probably. Just a crack in the distance, sharp and wrong. The second shot hit the wagon. Wood splintered near Cade's boot. He jerked the reins hard left, nearly tipping them into the ditch. Mara didn't scream, didn't panic. She just braced herself and held on. There's a rifle under the seat, Cade shouted. She didn't hesitate. Reached down, found it, pulled it up smooth and fast like she'd done it before. You know how to use that? Yes. Another shot. This one went wide. Mara turned in her seat, brought the rifle up, aimed. Don't kill them, Cade yelled. I'm not trying to. She fired. The shot went high and right, exactly where she'd aimed it. Close enough to spook, far enough not to hit. One of the horses reared. The rider fought to stay on. Mara worked the lever, fired again. This time both riders pulled up hard, slowing. Cade whipped the horses faster. The wagon hit a rut, bounced, nearly threw them both off. He fought the reins, got control, kept going. By the time he looked back again, the riders were gone. He didn't slow down until they were another 2 miles out, and even then he kept checking over his shoulder. Mara lowered the rifle. Her hands were steady. You want to tell me what that was about? Cade said. No. That's not good enough. It'll have to be. He pulled the wagon to a stop. The horses blew hard, sides heaving. Cade turned to face her. Lady, I don't know what kind of trouble you're running from, but I've got 2 kids at home and a ranch I'm trying to keep. If someone's shooting at you, they're not shooting at me. The hell they're not. They're shooting at what I'm carrying. Books? She didn't answer. Cade looked back at the trunk. It sat there in the wagon bed, innocent and heavy and suddenly a lot more interesting. What's really in there? He asked. Mara met his eyes. Hers were dark, unreadable. The reason men die. The ranch was small. Mara saw that the moment they came over the last rise. 200 acres, Cade had said in his telegram, but seeing it laid out in front of her, house, barn, a few scattered out buildings, fence lines that needed mending, it looked like less. It looked like barely enough. But it was something, and something was better than nothing. Cade pulled the wagon up to the house. Before he could even set the brake, the door flew open and 2 kids spilled out. The girl was older, 12, maybe 13. Blonde hair, sharp eyes, the kind of look that said she'd already decided not to like you. The boy was younger, darker, all knees and nerves. They both stopped dead when they saw Mara. Sarah, Danny, Cade said, climbing down. This is Mrs. Hale. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She's staying? She's staying. For how long? That's not your business. It is if she's sleeping in Mama's room. Cade's jaw tightened. Go inside. But now. Sarah shot Mara a look that could have curdled milk, then turned and stalked back into the house. Danny hesitated, gave Mara a shy half-wave, then followed his sister. Cade rubbed his face with both hands. Sorry about that. Don't be. Mara climbed down from the wagon. She's protecting what's hers. She's being a brat. She's being loyal. There's a difference. Cade looked at her surprised. Then he nodded. Come on, I'll show you the house. It was small inside, too. One main room that served as kitchen and sitting area, 2 bedrooms off the back, a loft above where the kids slept. Clean enough? Sparse. The kind of place where people lived because they had to, not because they wanted to. Mara set her bag down. Which room is mine? The one on the left. I'll sleep in the barn. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do. He said it quiet, but firm. Mara didn't push. She waited until he went back outside for the trunk, then walked through the house slowly. There were pictures on the mantel, a wedding photo, a family portrait, Cade's brother and his wife, probably. Both dead now. The kids looked younger in the photo, happier. She heard the trunk hit the porch, then Cade's boots scraping on the boards. Want me to put it in your room? He called. Leave it on the porch. It'll get wet if it rains. It survived worse. She heard him pause, then set it down where she asked. When he came back in, she was standing at the window, looking out at the barn, the fence line, the mountains beyond. "Reverend's coming tomorrow at noon," Cade said. "Ceremony won't take long. Few words, sign the papers, done. Fine. After that, you can do what you want. Keep house if you feel like it. The kids can fend for themselves if you don't." "I'll keep house." "You don't have to." "I know." She turned to face him. "But I will." They stood there for a moment, two strangers about to tie themselves together for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. "Those men on the road," Cade said finally. "They coming back?" "I don't know. But they might." "Yes." He nodded slowly, processing. "What's in the trunk, Mrs. Hale?" "Call me Mara." "What's in the trunk, Mara?" She looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide, maybe, how much truth he could handle, how much truth she could afford to give. "Proof," she said finally. "Of what?" "That powerful men are liars, and that my father died trying to prove it." The wedding was worse than Cade expected. Not because of the ceremony, that part was quick, bloodless, exactly as promised. Reverend Porter read from his book. They said the words they were supposed to say, signed the paper, done. 10 minutes, start to finish. No, it was worse because of who showed up. Franklin Schaefer arrived just as the Reverend was packing up. He came in a buggy, dressed like he was going to church, smile on his face like he'd been invited. "Congratulations," he said, shaking Cade's hand. "Mrs. Rourke." He nodded to Mara. She didn't nod back. Schaefer didn't seem to notice. "I took the liberty of filing the updated water rights paperwork this morning. Everything should be in order now." "Appreciate it," Cade said, though his teeth were clenched. Of course, just doing my job." Schaefer looked around the room, at the kids hovering near the door, at Mara standing stiff and silent, at the trunk sitting in the corner. "I trust Mrs. Rourke will be comfortable here." "She'll be fine." "Good, good. And the children are adjusting?" "They're fine too." "Excellent." Schaefer's smile never wavered. "Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to offer my congratulations in person." He tipped his hat to Mara. "Ma'am." She watched him leave without saying a word. When the buggy was gone, Cade turned to her. "You know him?" "No." "You sure looked at him like you did." "I've known men like him. That's enough." Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Can we eat now?" "Set the table," Cade said. "Why can't she do it?" Sarah jerked her chin toward Mara. "Because I told you to." Sarah stomped off. Danny followed, quieter, always following. Mara crossed to the trunk, knelt beside it, checked the locks. Still secure. "You planning to tell me what's in there anytime soon?" Cade asked. "Eventually." "How about now?" "How about you earn it first?" He almost laughed. "Lady, I just married you. What more do you want?" "I want to know if you're the kind of man who keeps his word even when it costs him." "I'm here, aren't I?" "You're here because you needed to be. That's not the same thing." She stood, brushed dust off her skirt. "When I know you'll stand even when you don't have to, I'll tell you everything. Until then, it stays locked." The first week passed in careful silence. Mara kept house like she said she would. She cooked, cleaned, mended clothes without being asked. She didn't try to mother the kids or force conversation or pretend this was anything other than what it was. Sarah ignored her. Danny watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. Cade worked. He fixed fence, moved cattle, rode out every morning before dawn and came back after dark. If he was avoiding her, he was doing a good job of it. Mara didn't mind. She'd lived alone for 3 years. Silence was familiar. But the nights were different. The first time she heard someone outside, she thought she'd imagined it. Just the wind, or an animal, or the house settling. The second time, she knew better. She rose from bed, still dressed. She'd stopped sleeping in nightgowns the day her father died, and crossed to the window. The moon was half full, throwing pale light across the yard. A shadow moved near the barn. Too big for a dog? Too deliberate for a cow. Mara reached for the rifle she'd propped in the corner, the same one from the wagon. She'd asked Cade if she could keep it in her room. He'd looked at her strange but said yes. She moved to the door, opened it slow. The hinges didn't creak. She'd oiled them 2 days ago. The shadow was closer now, moving toward the house. Mara stepped onto the porch. The boards were cold under her bare feet. She brought the rifle up, not aiming yet, just ready. That's far enough. The shadow stopped. I've got a rifle, Mara said. And I don't miss. A man's voice came back, low and rough. We don't want trouble. Then leave. We just want what's in the trunk. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale, ma'am. Question is just price. Mara pulled the hammer back. The click was loud in the quiet. Here's my price. You turn around and ride off, I don't put a hole in you. The shadow shifted. For a moment, she thought he might try something stupid. Then another voice spoke from behind her. She means it. Mara turned her head just enough to see Cade standing in the barn doorway, his own rifle up, aimed at the shadow. Two of us now, Cade said. Still want to try? The shadow backed up, slow, hands visible. This ain't over, he said. It is tonight, Cade replied. They watched him retreat into the darkness, heard a horse whinny, then hoofbeats fading. Mara lowered her rifle but didn't uncock it. Cade crossed the yard to the porch. Friend of yours? No. But he knew about the trunk. Yes. How many more are there? I don't know. Enough. Cade looked at her, really looked at her, for maybe the first time since she'd arrived. You need to tell me what's happening here. I will. When? Now. She turned and walked back inside. After a moment, Cade followed. They sat at the kitchen table. Mara made coffee. It was terrible. Too strong, too bitter, but neither of them cared. My real name is Mara Harrow, she began. Hale was my married name. I kept it after my husband died because it was easier than questions. Questions about what? About why my father was killed. She said it plain, like she was stating a fact. The sky is blue. Water is wet. Her father was murdered. Cade set his cup down. Go on. He was a county surveyor. Worked for the territorial government, mapping boundaries, verifying claims. Honest work. Boring work. She stared into her coffee. Until he found something that wasn't honest. What did he find? Someone had been altering records. Not just one or two, dozens. Maybe more. Boundary lines moved, water rights reassigned, entire parcels transferred without proper deeds. All done quietly, all done legally, because the people doing it controlled the paperwork. Who? I don't know all of them, but I know some. The county clerk, the land office director, at least two judges. She looked up. And your banker? Cade went very still. Schaefer. He showed up to the wedding, shook your hand, called me Mrs. Rourke. Her jaw tightened. He's one of them. How do you know? Because my father kept notes. Names, dates, transactions. Everything he found he wrote down. And when he tried to report it, she stopped, took a breath. They made it look like an accident. A fall from his horse, broken neck, very tragic. But you know it wasn't. I know he was an excellent rider. I know he'd ridden that road 100 times. And I know the day before he died, he told me he'd found something big. Something that went all the way to the top. What was it? I don't know. He died before he could tell me. She pushed the coffee away. But before he died, he hid the proof. The original records, survey maps, boundary markers, everything they'd altered, he kept copies of the real versions. And he left clues for me to find them. And you did. Some of them. The trunk holds what I've found so far. It's not complete, but it's enough to prove what they did. Cade ran a hand through his hair. So you're carrying around evidence that could hang half the county, and you thought hiding on a ranch would keep you safe. I didn't think it would keep me safe. I thought it would buy me time. She met his eyes. Your telegram said you needed a wife to keep your land. My telegram said I needed a legal name change and a place to disappear. Seemed like we could help each other. You lied to me. I omitted. There's a difference. Not much of one. No, she admitted. Not much. They sat in silence. The coffee went cold. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Finally, Cade spoke. These records, if they prove what you say they prove, they do. Then a lot of people are going to want them gone, including people with power. Yes. And you brought that here To my home, where my niece and nephew sleep. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Mara didn't flinch. Yes. You should have told me. Would you have agreed to marry me if I had? Cade opened his mouth, then closed it. They both knew the answer. What happens now? He asked. Now? Mara stood, collected the cups. Now we decide if we're going to fight or run. What do you want to do? I've been running for 3 years. She turned to face him. I'm tired of it. Fighting means putting everything at risk. Running means nothing changes. Men like Schaefer keep doing what they're doing, and people like your brother, people who trusted the system, keep getting crushed by it. Cade's expression darkened. Don't talk about my brother. Why not? Isn't that why you're here? Why you're working yourself to death trying to hold on to this place? She gestured around the small kitchen. This ranch that's barely surviving, this loan that's strangling you, you think that just happened? Or do you think maybe someone made it happen? You don't know what you're talking about. I know your brother took out a loan he couldn't pay back. I know the water rights clause that's squeezing you isn't standard. And I know Franklin Schaefer was the one who drafted it. Cade stood up fast. His chair scraped against the floor. You've been here a week. You don't know anything about my brother or this ranch or... I know the records in that trunk include a transfer of water rights from the Rourke homestead to the county trust, signed 3 years ago, right after your brother died. The kitchen went quiet. Show me, Cade said. The trunk sat on Mara's bedroom floor, locked and silent. She knelt beside it, worked the combination. The locks clicked open one by one. Cade stood in the doorway. He hadn't asked permission to follow her in. She hadn't told him to leave. The trunk opened. Inside were papers. Hundreds of them, organized in folders tied with string, stacked carefully. Maps rolled and bound, ledgers, notebooks in her father's cramped handwriting. Mara pulled out a folder marked Rourke. She handed it to Cade. He took it, opened it, started reading. His face went white. It's all here, he said quietly. The original claim, the boundary lines, the water rights transfer. He looked up. This signature. That's not my brother's handwriting. I know. Someone forged it. Yes. Schaefer? Or someone working for him? Cade flipped through the rest of the folder. There were more documents, more transfers, more signatures that looked wrong. How many others? He asked. 12 families in this county alone. Maybe more in the adjacent territories. All forged? Or coerced? Sometimes both. Cade closed the folder. His hands were shaking. My brother, he said slowly. He died 6 months after he took out the loan. Heart attack, the doctor said. He was 34. Mara didn't say anything. She didn't have to. You think they killed him too? I think a healthy 34-year-old man doesn't just drop dead, not unless someone helps it along. Cade turned and walked out of the room. Mara closed the trunk, locked it again. When she came out, he was standing at the kitchen window, staring out into the dark. I can leave, Mara said. Take the trunk, ride out tonight. You can tell Schaefer we had a disagreement. The marriage didn't work. I'm gone. He'll leave you alone. Will he? Probably. But you don't believe that. No. Cade turned to face her. His eyes were hard now, decided. How do we expose them? We take the evidence to someone who can't be bought. Federal land office, maybe. Or a territorial judge from outside the county. And until then, we keep the trunk safe. We keep ourselves safe. And we don't trust anyone. Not even the sheriff? Especially not the sheriff. He's on the list. Cade almost smiled. Of course he is. He crossed back to the table, sat down, drummed his fingers on the wood. Thinking. All right, he said finally. We fight, but we do it smart. No one knows what we have. No one knows what we're planning. As far as anyone's concerned, you're just my wife, and that trunk is just books. Agreed. And if someone comes for it again, we don't let them have it. Even if it means even then. They looked at each other across the table. A man and a woman who'd married as strangers, who'd barely spoken in a week, who now shared a secret that could get them both killed. This is insane, Cade said. Yes, we're probably going to die. possibly. And you're okay with that? Mara thought about her father, about the way they'd found him, neck broken, eyes open, lying in the dirt like he was nothing, like his life meant nothing and his work meant nothing, and the truth he died for would stay buried forever. I'm okay with it, she said. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the house creaked and settled. And in the bedroom, locked and waiting, the trunk held its secrets close. Tomorrow, they'd start figuring out what to do with them. Tonight, they just had to survive. The first thing that changed was the silence. It wasn't the comfortable kind anymore. It was the heavy kind, the waiting kind, the kind that pressed down on your chest until breathing felt like work. Cade noticed it 3 days after their conversation in the kitchen. He'd ridden out to check the north fence line and found 2 posts torn down, not weathered, not kicked over by cattle, cut clean through with a saw. He came back to the house and found Mara in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with the kind of focus that said she was thinking about something else entirely. Someone cut the fence, he said. Her hands didn't stop moving. Where? North pasture, near the creek access. That's not an accident. I know. She shaped the dough into a ball, set it in the bowl, covered it with a cloth. What did you do? Fixed it, put the post back up. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavy. But whoever did it was trying to send a message. They're testing you, seeing if you'll respond. How should I respond? You already did. You fixed it. That tells them you're not backing down. She wiped flour off her hands. They'll escalate. When? Soon. She was right. 2 nights later, someone tried to burn the barn. Cade woke to smoke yowling outside his window. The cat never made noise unless something was wrong. He rolled out of bed, grabbed his boots, and was halfway to the door when he smelled it. Smoke. Not from the stove. From outside. He burst through the door and saw orange light flickering near the barn. Flames, small but growing, eating up the dry wood near the base of the wall. Fire! He shouted. He ran. Behind him, he heard the house door slam open. Mara appeared with a bucket, already moving toward the well. Get the kids out, Cade yelled. They're already out. He looked back. Sarah and Danny were on the porch, wide-eyed and scared. Sarah had her arm around Danny's shoulders. Cade grabbed a bucket from the barn, filled it at the trough, threw water on the flames. They hissed and shrank, but didn't die. Mara appeared beside him with another bucket. Together they worked, back and forth, water sloshing, smoke burning their eyes. It took 20 minutes to kill it. When the last flame was out, Cade stood there breathing hard, face black with soot, hands blistered from the hot metal buckets. Mara crouched near the scorched wood, examining it. Look at this. He came over. She pointed to a spot low on the wall where the fire had started. There was a pile of straw there, soaked in something that smelled like kerosene. Someone set this, she said. I know. While we were sleeping. I know. She stood up, brushed ash off her hands. They could have killed the horses, could have killed all of us if the wind had been right. Cade looked at the barn, then at the house, then at the kids still standing on the porch watching them. This stops now, he said. How? I'm riding into town tomorrow, talking to the sheriff. The sheriff's on the list. I don't care. I'm a citizen. Someone tried to burn my property. He has to at least pretend to investigate. Mara studied him for a long moment. You think that'll help? No, but it'll let them know I'm not going to sit here and take it. Or it'll let them know you're scared. I am scared. My niece and nephew are sleeping 50 feet from where someone just tried to commit arson. I'd be stupid not to be scared. She nodded slowly. All right, but I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I know, but if you're going to walk into the lion's den, you should at least have someone watching your back. The kids went back to bed eventually, though Cade doubted either of them slept. He and Mara sat on the porch until dawn, rifles across their laps, watching the darkness. Nothing else happened that night, but the barn smelled like smoke for weeks. Morning came cold and gray. Cade hitched up the wagon while Mara packed a small bag. Sarah appeared in the doorway as they were getting ready to leave. Where are you going? Town, Cade said. Be back by supper. Why is she going? Because I asked her to. Sarah's mouth twisted. You never take me to town anymore. That's because last time you stole penny candy from Harmon's store. I didn't steal it. I was going to pay for it later. That's what stealing is, Sarah. The girl crossed her arms. I don't like her. Mara was standing close enough to hear. She didn't react, just kept loading supplies into the wagon. Cade lowered his voice. I don't care if you like her. I care that you're respectful. Why? She's not my mother? No, she's not. But she's here, and she's trying, and you're going to give her a chance. What if I don't want to? Then you can explain that to me when I get back. Until then, you and Danny stay close to the house. Don't go wandering. Someone comes by, you get inside and bar the door. Understand? That got her attention. The attitude dropped, replaced by something younger and more scared. You think someone's coming? I think someone already came last night. So yeah, I want you careful. Sarah nodded. Behind her, Danny appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. We're going to town, Sarah told him. We have to stay inside. Why? Because Uncle Cade said so. Danny looked at Cade, then at Mara, then back at Cade. Is it because of the fire? Partly. Are we in trouble? Nobody. We're just being careful. The kid didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. Cade and Mara left an hour later. The ride into town was quiet. The sky stayed gray, threatening rain but never delivering. The road was rutted and rough from spring runoff. Halfway there, Mara spoke. The girl hates me. She doesn't hate you, she's just protective. Of you? Of the memory of her mother. Cade adjusted the reins. Her parents died 7 months ago. Fever, both of them, 3 days apart. Sarah's been angry ever since. At who? Everyone? Me, mostly, for not being her father. He glanced over. And now you, for trying to replace her mother. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I know that. She doesn't. They rode in silence for a while. Then Mara said, My mother died when I was young, younger than Sarah. I was angry too. What'd you do about it? Nothing good, picked fights, broke things, made my father's life harder than it needed to be. She looked out at the passing landscape. Eventually, I realized being angry didn't bring her back. It just made the people who were still alive more miserable. How long did that take? Years. Great. She almost smiled. Sarah's smarter than I was. She'll figure it out faster. I hope so, because right now she's about one insult away from me losing my patience. Don't. Mara's voice was firm. She needs to get it out. Bottling it up just makes it worse. So I'm supposed to let her be rude to you? I can handle rude. I've handled worse. She shifted in her seat. What I can't handle is a kid who's hurting and has no way to express it. So let her be angry. Let her push back. When she's ready to stop, she will. Cade looked at her. You're smarter than you look. You're less of an ass than I expected. This time he did smile. Just a little. They reached town just before noon. The main street was busier than usual. Market day, which meant farmers and ranchers from all over the county crowding the storefronts and stock pens. Cade tied up the wagon outside the sheriff's office. The building was small, squat, built from red brick that had faded to rust. A sign hung over the door. Sheriff William Taggart. Cade had known Bill Taggart for 10 years. They'd worked cattle drives together back when Cade's brother was alive. Bill was a decent man, or had been once. Honest enough, fair enough. But honest enough and fair enough weren't the same as trustworthy. Cade pushed open the door. Mara followed. The office was one room, cramped and cluttered. A desk sat against one wall, covered in papers and wanted posters. 2 cells in the back, both empty. And behind the desk, boots propped up, hat pulled low over his eyes, was Bill Taggart. He didn't move when they came in. Bill, Cade said. Taggart pushed his hat back, blinked at them. Cade, been a while. Yeah. Heard you got married. Congratulations. His eyes slid to Mara. Ma'am. She nodded but didn't speak. Taggart swung his boots down, sat up straighter. What brings you in? Someone tried to burn my barn last night. That got his attention. Burn it? You sure? Found kerosene-soaked straw at the base. Fire was deliberate. Taggart frowned, pulled out a pencil and paper. You see who did it? No. Hear anything? See anyone riding off? No. Got any enemies? Someone you had a disagreement with recently? Cade hesitated. This was the moment. He could say no, drop it, walk away. Or he could push. He pushed. Someone cut my fence 3 days ago, north pasture, clean cuts like they were sending a message. What kind of message? The kind that says they want me gone. Taggart wrote that down. Any idea who? Not yet. But you've got suspicions. Yeah. Care to share? Cade glanced at Mara. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet, Cade said. Taggart set the pencil down. Cade, if you know something, you need to tell me. I can't help you if you won't talk. I'm talking. I'm telling you someone's harassing me. Someone's trying to run me off my land. And you think it's connected to what? Your marriage? Maybe. Why would your marriage make someone want to burn your barn? I don't know, Bill. That's your job to figure out. Taggart leaned back in his chair. It creaked under him. Look, I'll ride out tomorrow. Take a look at the damage. Talk to your neighbors, see if anyone saw anything. But unless you give me more to go on, that's all I've got right now. Then that's all I can do. They stared at each other. Two men who used to trust each other, who didn't anymore, who both knew it but couldn't say it out loud. Finally, Cade stood. Appreciate your time. I'll be out tomorrow morning. We'll be there. Cade and Mara walked out. The door closed behind them with a soft click. They were halfway to the wagon when Mara spoke. He's not going to help. I know. He's going to report back to whoever's paying him. I know that too. Then why did we come? Cade climbed into the wagon, waited for her to climb up beside him. Because now they know I'm not ignoring it, and because Taggart knows I filed a report. If something happens to me, there's a record. You think that'll stop them? No, but it might make them hesitate. They headed down the main street, past the general store and the saloon and the bank. Cade didn't look at the bank, didn't want to risk seeing Schaefer in the window. But as they passed, the door opened. Mr. Rourke! Cade's jaw tightened. He pulled the wagon to a stop. Franklin Schaefer came down the steps, all smiles and politeness. Fancy seeing you in town, Mrs. Rourke. He tipped his hat to Mara. Mr. Schaefer, Cade said. How's married life treating you? Fine. Excellent, excellent. And the ranch? Everything running smoothly? As smooth as it gets? Glad to hear it. Schaefer's smile didn't waver. I heard there was some trouble out your way last night. A fire? Cade went very still. Where'd you hear that? Oh, you know how it is. Small town, word travels. Schaefer clasped his hands behind his back. I do hope no one was hurt. No one was hurt? And the damage? Minimal. Well, that's fortunate. Very fortunate. Schaefer paused, like he was considering his next words carefully. You know, Mr. Rourke, if you're having difficulties, financial or otherwise, the bank is always willing to discuss options. I don't need options. Of course not. I'm simply saying the offer stands, should circumstances change. His eyes flicked to Mara, then back to Cade. Sometimes new obligations bring unexpected expenses. It's only natural to need assistance. We're fine. I'm sure you are. But if you find yourself in need... He let the sentence hang, then smiled again. Well, you know where to find me. He tipped his hat once more and walked back into the bank. Cade didn't move. His hands gripped the reins so tight his knuckles went white. Mara touched his arm. Drive. He drove. They made it 2 blocks before he spoke. He knows. Of course he knows. About the fire. About the fence. Probably about the riders on the road, too. He either knows or he ordered it himself. Cade wanted to turn the wagon around. Wanted to march back into that bank and drag Schaefer out by his collar and beat the truth out of him. He didn't. Instead, he drove home. The rain finally came that afternoon, heavy and cold. It turned the road to mud and soaked them both through before they made it halfway back. By the time they reached the ranch, Cade's teeth were chattering and Mara's hair hung in wet ropes down her back. Sarah and Danny met them at the door. Did you see the sheriff? Sarah asked. Yeah. Is he going to catch who did it? He's going to try. That was enough for Danny, but Sarah's eyes narrowed. She knew a non-answer when she heard one. Cade changed into dry clothes while Mara started a fire in the stove. The house warmed slowly. Outside, the rain pounded the roof and turned the yard to soup. They ate supper in near silence, beans and cornbread, simple and filling. The kids went to bed early. Kate and Mara stayed at the table. "We need a plan," Mara said. "I'm open to suggestions." "We can't wait for them to make the next move. Every time they escalate, we're reacting. We need to act first." "Doing what?" "Finish finding the rest of the evidence. My father's notes mention a location, a survey marker in the mountains where he hid the original boundary maps. If we can find that, we'll have everything we need to take to the territorial office." Cade rubbed his face. "How far into the mountains?" 2 days' ride, maybe 3. "That's a long time to be away from the ranch." "It's a longer time to sit here waiting for them to burn us out." She was right. He hated that she was right, but she was. "When?" he asked. "Soon. Before they figure out what we're doing." "And the kids? Can they stay with someone? A neighbor you trust?" Kate thought about it. The Hendersons lived 5 miles east. They were decent people, kept to themselves. Mrs. Henderson had sent over food after his brother died. She'd probably take the kids for a few days. "Maybe," he said. "I'll ask." "Then we leave as soon as they're settled." Cade looked at her across the table. Her hair was still damp from the rain. Her dress was worn and patched. She looked tired, but she also looked determined. "You really think we can win this?" he asked. "I think we can try, and trying's better than dying quietly." That night, Cade lay awake in the barn, listening to the rain. His mind wouldn't settle. Too many thoughts, too many variables, too many ways this could go wrong. He thought about his brother, about the loan, the forged signature, the convenient heart attack. He thought about Sarah and Danny, asleep in the house, unaware of just how much danger they were in. He thought about Mara, locked in her room with a trunk full of secrets that men were willing to kill for. And he thought about Schaefer, standing on the bank steps, all smiles and veiled threats. Somewhere in the darkness, a decision crystallized. He wasn't going to run, wasn't going to back down, wasn't going to let them take what was his, not the land, not the water, not the truth. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one. But he'd do it smart. He'd do it careful. And he'd do it with Mara Harrow at his side. Because she'd been fighting this fight longer than he had, and she was still standing. The rain slowed around midnight, then stopped altogether. The clouds broke apart, revealing stars. Cade finally slept. The next morning, Sheriff Taggart arrived just after breakfast. He rode up alone, dismounted slow, tied his horse to the porch rail. Cade met him in the yard. "Morning," Taggart said. "Morning. Mind if I take a look at that barn?" "Be my guest." They walked over together. Taggart examined the scorched wood, the pile of straw, the smell that still lingered. He crouched down, touched the blackened boards, sniffed his fingers. "Kerosene," he said. "Told you." "Yeah, you did." Taggart stood, brushed his hands off. "Any chance this was an accident? Maybe someone was careless with a lamp." "At 3 in the morning, outside the barn?" "Just asking." "It wasn't an accident, Bill." Taggart nodded slowly. "All right. I'll put it in my report. Arson, perpetrator unknown. If I hear anything, I'll let you know." "That's it?" "What do you want me to do, Cade? I've got no witnesses, no suspects, no evidence except burnt wood. Unless you've got more information." "I don't." "Then that's it." They walked back to the yard. Taggart untied his horse, swung up into the saddle. "Cade," he said, looking down, "whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. People are talking." "About what?" "About your new wife, about where she came from, about that trunk she keeps locked up." Taggart's expression was unreadable. "Some folks think you've brought trouble to the valley. Some folks should mind their own business." "Maybe, but trouble doesn't care whose business it is. It spreads." He gathered the reins. "Watch yourself." He rode off. Mara came out of the house as he disappeared down the road. "He warned you," she said. "Yeah." "Hey, that means they're getting ready to move. How long do we have?" "Days, maybe less." Cade looked at the barn, the house, the land stretching out in every direction, everything he'd fought to keep, everything he might lose. "Then we'd better move faster." That afternoon, he rode to the Henderson place. Martha Henderson was hanging laundry when he arrived. She was a round woman, practical and kind, the type who'd feed you whether you were hungry or not. "Cade Rourke," she said, smiling. "Haven't seen you in an age." "Been busy." "I heard. Married, Got yourself a wife. About time, too. Yes, ma'am. So what brings you out here? Social call? Not exactly. He dismounted, held his hat in his hands. I need to ask a favor. She listened while he explained. Not everything, just enough. He and Mara needed to be away for a few days. Business in the territorial office, too far to take the kids. Could Sarah and Danny stay here until they got back? Martha didn't hesitate. Of course they can. I'll fatten them up proper while they're here. I appreciate it. When are you leaving? Tomorrow morning. That soon? Can't wait much longer. She studied him with sharp eyes. You in some kind of trouble, Cade? I hope not. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Martha sighed, wiped her hands on her apron. All right, bring them by at dawn, but Cade, you be careful. Whatever you're doing, you be careful. Yes, ma'am. He rode home as the sun was setting. The sky turned orange, then purple, then black. Stars came out, cold and distant. When he got back, Mara was packing supplies, food, blankets, rope, ammunition. The trunk sat open in her room. She'd taken what she needed from it and locked the rest away. Kids are settled? She asked. They will be. Dropping them at the Hendersons tomorrow. They asked questions? Sarah did. Danny just looked scared. What did you tell them? That we'd be back in a few days. That they needed to be good. He leaned against the doorframe. Sarah didn't believe me. She's smart. Too smart. Mara closed the pack, tied it shut. We should leave early, before anyone's watching. You think they're watching now? I think they've been watching since the day I arrived. That night, Cade didn't sleep in the barn. He stayed in the house, rifle across his lap, watching the windows. Mara did the same in her room. Nothing happened. But the quiet felt wrong, like the moment before a storm breaks. Dawn came gray and cold. Cade woke the kids, helped them pack their things. Sarah was sullen, Danny clingy. They loaded into the wagon without speaking. The ride to the Hendersons was short. Martha met them at the door, arms open, ready to gather the children in. You be good now, Cade told them. Mind Mrs. Henderson, do what she says. When are you coming back? Danny asked. Few days. Promise? Cade crouched down, looked the boy in the eye. I promise. Sarah stood apart, arms crossed. You're lying. Sarah, you're going somewhere dangerous and you're lying about it. I'm not lying about coming back. But you're lying about where you're going. Cade stood. When you're older, I'll explain. Right now I need you to trust me. I don't. The words hit harder than they should have. Cade opened his mouth, closed it, didn't know what to say. Mara stepped forward. Your uncle's trying to protect you. That doesn't always look like the truth, but it's still protection. Sarah glared at her. You don't get to talk to me. Fair enough. Mara didn't flinch. But when he comes back, you owe him an apology. Why would I? Because he's doing this for you. All of it. The marriage, the risk, everything. And the least you can do is recognize that. Sarah's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Cade touched her shoulder. We'll be back soon. He didn't wait for her to respond. Just climbed back into the wagon and drove away. In the rear view, he saw Martha usher the kids inside. Sarah stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching, then she was gone. Mara sat beside him, silent. Thank you, Cade said quietly. For what? For saying what I couldn't. She needed to hear it from someone who's not you. They rode back to the ranch, loaded the horses with supplies, and checked their weapons one last time. The sun was climbing now, burning off the morning mist. Mara locked the trunk, hid the key in a place only she knew. Cade barred the doors, checked the windows, made sure everything was secure. Then they mounted up and rode east, toward the mountains, toward whatever was waiting there. Behind them, the ranch sat quiet and empty. Ahead, the peaks rose sharp against the sky. And somewhere between here and there, the truth was buried. All they had to do was dig it up without getting killed in the process. The mountains didn't welcome them. By mid-afternoon of the first day, the trail had narrowed to barely more than a deer path. Rocks jutted up through thin soil, and the pines grew so thick in places that Cade had to dismount and lead his horse through gaps between trunks. The air thinned as they climbed, each breath coming a little harder than the last. Mara rode ahead, following a map she'd drawn from her father's notes. The paper was old, creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. The ink faded in spots where water had touched it years ago. "You sure you're reading that right?" Cade called. "No." "That's reassuring." My father wasn't writing for clarity. He was writing so only I could follow it. She pulled her horse to a stop, studied the map, then looked up at the ridgeline. "We're supposed to find a split pine near a creek crossing. From there, we go north until we hit a rock formation that looks like a broken tooth." "How long ago did he write this?" 4 years? "Trees fall in 4 years. Creeks dry up." "I know." "So we might be chasing nothing." Mara folded the map, tucked it back into her coat. "Then we're chasing nothing, but we're still going." They rode on. The sun dropped behind the western peaks, throwing long shadows across the trail. The temperature fell with it. Cade could see his breath now, pale clouds that vanished as fast as they formed. They made camp in a clearing where the trees opened up enough to see the sky. No fire, too risky. Someone could be following, could see the smoke. So they ate cold jerky and hardtack and shared a canteen of water that tasted like metal. Cade spread his bedroll on the driest patch of ground he could find. Mara did the same a few feet away. Between them, the horses stood hobbled and tired. "Tell me about your father," Cade said. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Why?" "Because I'm trusting him to lead us to something that might get us killed. Seems like I should know who he was." She pulled her blanket tighter. "He was stubborn. Thought the world could be fixed if people just followed the rules. Believed in systems, in order, in putting things down on paper so they couldn't be twisted." She paused. "He was wrong about that last part, but not the rest?" "No. He was stubborn until the day he died." Her voice went softer. "Stubborn enough to hide evidence instead of running. Stubborn enough to think he could fight men with power and win." "Sounds like someone else I know." She almost smiled. "I didn't say it was a bad quality." "You didn't say it was a good one either." "It got him killed. So, no, I guess it wasn't good." She shifted on her bedroll, adjusting to the uneven ground. "But he died trying to do the right thing. That counts for something." Cade thought about his brother, about choices made in desperation, about loans signed without reading the fine print, about trusting the wrong people because you didn't have a choice. "Yeah," he said, "it counts." They slept in shifts. Cade took first watch, sitting with his rifle across his knees, listening to the night sounds. Owls called. Something small rustled through the underbrush. The wind moved through the pines with a sound like rushing water. Nothing human. When he woke Mara for her shift, she sat up without groaning, took the rifle without complaint. He handed over the watch like they'd done this before, like they were a team that had been working together for years instead of weeks. He slept poorly. The ground was hard. The cold crept through the blanket, and his mind wouldn't settle. He dreamed of fires and forged signatures, and a man falling from his horse with his neck bent wrong. Dawn came pale and reluctant. They broke camp quickly, chewed more jerky, drank more metallic water. Mara checked the map again. "We're close," she said. "How close?" "The split pine should be within a mile." It took them 3 hours to find it. The tree stood at the edge of a creek that was barely more than a trickle. Lightning had hit it at some point, splitting the trunk down the middle but not killing it. Both halves grew upward, reaching for light, creating a V shape that would have been striking if Cade had been in the mood to appreciate nature. He wasn't. "This it?" he asked. Mara dismounted, walked to the tree, touched the scarred wood. "Yes." "Now what?" "Now we go north, look for the rock formation." They followed the creek upstream. The ground rose steadily, the air grew thinner, and the trees started to give way to open slopes covered in scree. Cade's horse picked its way carefully over loose stones that shifted and clattered with every step. 2 hours later, Mara stopped. "There." Cade followed her gaze. Ahead, maybe half a mile up the slope, a formation of rock jutted from the mountainside. It was darker than the surrounding stone, volcanic maybe, shaped by wind and time into something that could, if you squinted, look like a jagged tooth. "That's it?" Mara said. They rode closer. The terrain fought them, steep, loose, treacherous. Cade's horse stumbled twice. The second time he dismounted and led it on foot, boots slipping on shale that wanted to slide him back down the mountain. When they reached the formation, Mara was already off her horse, studying the base of the rock. My father's notes said there's a cairn, a pile of stones marking the spot. She walked the perimeter, eyes scanning the ground. Help me look. Cade tied off the horses and joined her. They searched in widening circles, moving rocks aside, checking crevices, looking for anything that seemed deliberately placed. It was Mara who found it. Here. The cairn was small, easy to miss. Just 5 or 6 stones stacked in a way that could have been natural but wasn't. Mara knelt beside it, started removing the stones one by one. Underneath was a metal box. It was rusted, dented, sealed with wax that had cracked with age. Mara pulled it free, brushed dirt from the lid. "This is it," she said quietly. "You sure?" She turned the box over. On the bottom, scratched into the metal, were 2 letters. J.H. James Harrow, she said. My father. She broke the wax seal, pried open the lid. Inside were papers. Maps mostly, hand-drawn and detailed. Boundary surveys, water rights allocations, land grants, all marked with her father's handwriting, all showing different lines than the official records. Proof. Real, undeniable proof that the land had been stolen, the records altered, the system corrupted from the inside. Mara's hands shook as she lifted the papers out. "This is everything," she whispered. "This is what he died for." Cade leaned closer, looked at the maps. He recognized some of the names. The Patterson Ranch, the McAllister homestead, his own land, marked with boundaries that extended further than what he currently owned. "They took 1/3 of my property," he said. "They took from everyone, some more, some less. Enough that it wouldn't be obvious to any one family, but together," she gestured at the stack of papers. "Together, it's theft on a massive scale." "How much land are we talking about?" "Thousands of acres, maybe tens of thousands." She carefully returned the papers to the box, closed the lid, and all the water rights that go with it. Cade stood, looked back down the mountain toward the valley they'd left behind. From up here, it looked peaceful, small, like the problems down there couldn't possibly matter, but they did. "We need to get this to the territorial office," he said. "I know. Which means getting back down this mountain without—" The crack of a rifle shot cut him off. The bullet hit the rock formation behind them, sending chips of stone flying. Cade grabbed Mara, pulled her down behind cover. The metal box fell from her hands, hit the ground, didn't break. Another shot. This one closer. "Where are they?" Mara hissed. Cade peered around the edge of the rock. Below them, maybe 300 yards down the slope, he saw movement. 3 riders, dismounted, rifles up. 3 of them. They've got the high ground below us. "We can't go down." "Can't stay here either." Another shot. Then another. Both hit close enough that Cade could feel the percussion in his chest. Mara grabbed the metal box, shoved it into her saddlebag. "We go up, over the ridge." "On horseback? That terrain will break their legs." "Then we go on foot." She was already moving, untying her horse, grabbing what supplies she could carry. Cade did the same, working fast, hands clumsy with adrenaline. More shots. A bullet hit near his boot, ricocheted off stone with a sound like a bell ringing. "Go," he shouted. They ran. Not down, toward the shooters. Up, toward the ridge. The horses followed, confused and frightened. The slope was brutal. 45 degrees in places, covered in loose rock that gave way with every step. Cade's lungs burned. His legs screamed. Behind him, he could hear Mara breathing hard, fighting to keep pace. The shooting stopped. For a moment, Cade thought maybe the shooters had given up. Then he heard shouting, voices echoing up the slope. They were coming. "Faster," he gasped. "I'm trying." They scrambled over a ridge of broken rock, dropped down the other side into a narrow ravine. The horses balked, but Cade pulled his mount forward, half dragging it. Mara's horse reared, nearly pulled free, but she held on. They kept moving. The ravine twisted, climbed, became so narrow in places they had to turn sideways to fit through. Cade's shoulders scraped stone on both sides. His horse's breath came in ragged gasps. Then the ravine opened up. They emerged onto a shelf of rock with a drop-off on one side and a sheer cliff on the other. Nowhere to go but forward, along a path barely wide enough for one horse at a time. Cade looked back. He could see the riders now, closer, coming up through the ravine behind them. "We're boxed in," he said. Mara looked at the path ahead, then at the cliff, then at the drop-off. How far is that fall? Too far. But survivable? Are you insane? She pulled the metal box from her saddlebag, held it up. They want this. If we don't have it, they have no reason to chase us. What are you, But she was already moving. She ran to the edge, drew her arm back, and threw the box as hard as she could. It arced through the air, spinning, catching sunlight. Then it disappeared over the edge. For a moment, everything was silent. Then came the sound of metal hitting rock, far below, echoing up from somewhere they couldn't see. You just threw away the only proof we had, Cade said. No, I just gave us a chance to live long enough to retrieve it. She grabbed his arm. Now move. They ran along the narrow path, horses stumbling, hooves scraping. Behind them, the riders emerged from the ravine. Someone shouted. A shot rang out. The bullet hit Cade's horse. The animal screamed, went down hard. Cade barely managed to jump clear before it fell, tumbling, sliding toward the drop-off. He watched, helpless, as his horse disappeared over the edge. Cade! Mara reached back, grabbed his hand, pulled him forward. They ran together now, sharing her horse, one on foot and one mounted. Another shot. Mara's horse stumbled but didn't fall. The path curved, widened slightly, then dumped them out onto a broader slope. Trees here, scattered and wind-bent, but enough for cover. Into the trees, Cade said. They made it 20 feet before Mara's horse gave out. The animal's front legs buckled, and it went down slowly, almost gently, like it was apologizing. Mara dismounted, grabbed her rifle and the saddlebags, and ran. Cade was right behind her. They crashed through underbrush, ducked behind trunks, moved as fast as the terrain allowed. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Mara stopped behind a fallen log, brought her rifle up. We make a stand here. 3 against 2. Better odds than running. Cade dropped beside her, checked his rifle. 6 rounds left. Not enough, but it would have to be. The first rider appeared through the trees. Mara fired. The shot went wide, intentionally, Cade thought. Warning shot. The rider dove for cover. Federal Land Survey, Mara shouted. You're interfering with territorial business. A voice came back, rough and amused. Ain't no federal surveyors up here, lady. There are now. Then where's your badge? Where's yours? Silence. Then laughter. You got spirit, I'll give you that. The voice moved, circling. But you're outnumbered, and you know it. Just hand over what you took from that box, and we'll let you walk down. We don't have it, Mara called back. Bull! It's the truth. Check the ravine. We threw it. More silence. Cade could hear them conferring, voices low, then the same voice again. You're lying. I'm not. Look at the cliff edge. See the scuff marks where we stopped? That's where it went over. A long pause. Cade used the time to shift position, get a better angle. All right, the voice said finally. We'll check. But if you're lying, we're coming back, and we won't be asking nice. The sound of movement, retreating, growing fainter. Cade waited until he couldn't hear them anymore before lowering his rifle. They'll find it, he said, eventually, but not before we do. How do you figure? Because we're going down the fast way. She pointed toward the drop-off they'd just escaped from. That box fell into the ravine below this slope. If we climb down carefully, we can beat them to it. Carefully? That's a 200-foot drop. Then we'd better be very careful. She stood, checked her supplies, and started back the way they'd come. After a moment, Cade followed. The climb down was everything terrible he'd imagined, and worse. They found a spot where the cliff face was broken enough to offer handholds, and started descending. Mara went first. Cade came after, testing each grip before committing his weight. The rock was cold. His fingers went numb within minutes. Twice he slipped, caught himself, hung for terrifying seconds while his boots scraped for purchase. Below him, Mara moved with surprising confidence. She'd done this before, he realized, climbed like this, maybe with her father, searching for survey markers in places only mountains could hide. Don't look down, she called up. He looked down. Bad idea. The ground was very far away and the rocks at the bottom looked very hard. Why did I look down? He muttered. Everyone looks down. You said not to. I know, but you did anyway. Despite everything, he almost laughed. They were halfway down when Mara's foot slipped. She caught herself on a ledge, but her saddlebag swung loose, caught on a jutting rock, and tore. Supplies spilled out: food, ammunition, rope, and something else. A small notebook, leather-bound, tied with string. It tumbled through the air, bounced off the cliff face, and disappeared into the ravine below. Mara cursed, a word Cade hadn't heard her use before. "What was that?" he called. "My father's field notes, the ones I've been using to navigate. Can we find them?" "If we live long enough, yes." They kept climbing. Cade's arms were shaking by the time they reached the bottom. He dropped the last 6 feet, landed hard, rolled, came up gasping. Mara landed beside him, more controlled but breathing just as hard. "Never doing that again," Cade said. "We might have to climb back up." "Then I'm staying down here." She was already moving, searching the ravine floor. Cade joined her, scanning the jumbled rocks and scrub. There. The metal box lay wedged between 2 boulders. The lid had popped open on impact, and papers were scattered across the ground, some torn, some intact. Mara gathered them carefully, checked each one. Most of it survived. A few maps are damaged, but readable. "What about your father's notebook?" "Haven't found it yet." They searched for another 10 minutes before Cade spotted it, caught in a thorn bush, pages fluttering in the breeze. He pulled it free, handed it to Mara. She flipped through it, checking for damage. "It's fine. Little torn up, but fine." Relief washed over her face just for a moment before she locked it down again. Cade looked up at the cliff they'd just descended. "We can't go back that way." "No, we follow the ravine out. It should connect to the lower trail eventually." "Should?" "My father's notes aren't perfect." "Great." They walked. The ravine twisted and narrowed, became a gorge with walls so high the sun barely reached the bottom. Water ran here, a thin stream that made the rocks slick. Cade slipped twice, caught himself both times. Hours passed. The light changed, grew orange, then purple. They were losing the day. "We need to stop," Cade said. "Not yet." "Mara, we can barely see." "Just a little further." But further became another hour, and another, until they were stumbling through near darkness with only starlight to guide them. Finally, the ravine opened up. They emerged onto a slope overlooking the valley. Below them, miles away, Cade could see scattered lights. Homesteads, ranches, civilization. "There," Mara said, pointing. "I see it." They made camp without fire again, ate what little food remained, and shared the last of the water. Cade's body ached everywhere. His hands were cut and bleeding from the climb. His legs felt like they might give out if he asked them to do anything more demanding than sitting. Mara looked just as bad. Her coat was torn, her face scratched, her hands shaking from exhaustion. "You all right?" he asked. "No, you?" "No." She pulled the metal box closer, opened it again, looked at the papers inside. "But we got it. That's what matters." "We got it. Now we just have to get it somewhere that matters." "The Territorial Land Office. In the capital. That's 3 days' ride. On horseback. We don't have horses." Cade rubbed his face. "So we walk." "We walk." "With men hunting us." "Yes. And no supplies." "We'll figure it out." He wanted to argue. Wanted to say this was impossible, that they should find help, that they were in over their heads. But looking at Mara, at the determination in her eyes, at the way she held that box like it was worth dying for, he couldn't, because maybe it was. "All right," he said, "we walk." They slept in shifts again. Cade took first watch, sat with his rifle across his knees, and listened to the night. Somewhere in the darkness, men were searching for them. Men with guns and orders and no intention of letting them reach the capital. Somewhere below, Sarah and Danny were safe at the Hendersons, wondering if he'd keep his promise to come back. And somewhere in the valley, a banker sat in his office, confident that his secrets would stay buried. Cade looked at the metal box. Not anymore. When Mara woke him for his turn to sleep, she was staring at the stars. "My father used to show me constellations," she said quietly. "Teach me the names. Tell me stories about them." "What kind of stories?" "The old ones. Greek, Roman, gods and heroes and tragedies. She pulled her blanket tighter. He said the stars were proof that some things last, that men come and go, but the patterns stay. You believe that? I don't know, but I'd like to. Cade lay down, closed his eyes, tried to sleep. The last thing he heard before exhaustion took him was Mara's voice, barely a whisper. We're going to make it. We have to. He hoped she was right, because the alternative was dying in these mountains with the truth still locked in a metal box, and nobody left alive to tell it. Morning came with frost. Cade woke to find ice crystals on his blanket and his breath hanging in the air like smoke. His entire body had stiffened overnight, shoulders, back, legs, everything protesting the moment he tried to move. Mara was already awake, crouched near a flat stone, studying her father's notebook in the early light. How long you been up? Cade asked, his voice rough. Hour, maybe. You should have woken me for watch. You needed the sleep more than I needed company. He sat up, wincing. Every muscle screamed. Find anything useful in there? Maybe. There's a settlement about 15 miles southeast. Small place, just a trading post and a few houses. We might be able to get supplies, maybe even horses if we're lucky. And if we're not? Then we keep walking. Cade looked down at the valley. From up here, he could trace the main road winding between homesteads. Somewhere down there, men were looking for them. Schaefer would have sent word by now. The sheriff, the riders who'd chased them into the mountains. Everyone with something to lose would be watching the roads. We can't use the main trail, he said. I know. We cut cross-country, stay off the roads until we're closer to the capital. That'll add days. It'll add life. I'll take the trade. They ate the last of the jerky, 2 pieces each, barely enough to matter. Cade's stomach growled in protest. He ignored it. They packed what little remained of their supplies. The metal box went into Mara's torn saddlebag, wrapped in what was left of a blanket to keep the papers dry. Cade carried the rifles. It was all they had now. The descent took most of the morning. The slope was gentler here, but without horses. Every mile felt like 3. Cade's boots, meant for riding, not hiking, rubbed blisters on his heels. He could feel them forming, hot and painful, but there was nothing to do except keep walking. By noon, they'd reached the tree line. The mountains gave way to foothills, then to scrubland dotted with sage and juniper. The land flattened out, and for the first time in 2 days, Cade could see the horizon stretching in every direction. It made him feel exposed. Stay low, Mara said, like she was thinking the same thing. They kept to the washes and gullies, following the natural contours of the land. It was slower, more circuitous, but it kept them hidden from anyone watching from high ground. The sun climbed, turned brutal. Cade's canteen had been lost with his horse, and Mara's was nearly empty. They rationed what was left, 1 sip every hour, just enough to wet their throats. It wasn't enough. By mid-afternoon, Cade's mouth felt like it was full of sand. His head pounded. Every step required conscious effort. We need water, he said. I know. How far to that settlement? Still 10 miles, maybe more. We're not making it 10 miles without water. Mara stopped, looked around. The landscape was harsh and dry, nothing but scrub and rock and dust. No creeks, no springs, nothing. Then her eyes caught on something in the distance. There, she said, pointing. Cade squinted. At first he saw nothing, then he made out a dark smudge against the pale ground. Trees, maybe. Or at least something green. Could be a seep, Mara said. Worth checking. They changed direction, angling toward the spot. It took another hour to reach it, and by the time they did, Cade was stumbling more than walking. It was a seep. Water bubbled up from between rocks, forming a small pool no bigger than a wash basin before soaking back into the ground. The water was cloudy, probably full of minerals, but it was water. Cade dropped to his knees, cupped his hands, drank deep. It tasted like metal and earth and life. Mara drank too, then filled her canteen. They sat beside the seep for a few minutes, letting their bodies remember what it felt like not to be dying of thirst. We should keep moving, Mara said finally. I know. But neither of them moved. The exhaustion was too heavy, the temptation to just stop too strong. Finally, Cade forced himself to stand. Come on, before I change my mind. They walked until the sun started dropping toward the western peaks. The settlement Mara had mentioned appeared in the distance. A handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. Smoke rose from one chimney. A single wagon sat outside what looked like a general store. "We go in together," Cade said. "Buy what we need, don't linger, don't talk to anyone we don't have to." Agreed. "And if someone recognizes us, they won't. But if they do," Mara touched the rifle slung over her shoulder, "then we leave fast." They approached from the east, keeping off the main road until the last possible moment. The settlement was even smaller up close than it had looked from a distance. 4 buildings total: the general store, a blacksmith shop, a building that might have been a saloon or boarding house, and something that looked abandoned. A man sat on the porch of the general store, whittling. He looked up as they approached, eyes narrowing. "Help you folks?" "Need supplies," Cade said. "Food, water, rope if you've got it." "Got all that inside. Cost you, though." "We can pay." The man studied them, took in their torn clothes, the dust caked on their faces, the rifles. His expression didn't change, but Cade saw him clock every detail. "You two look like you've been through it." "Rough trail," Cade said. "I'll bet." The man stood, folded his knife, tucked it away. "Come on, then." Inside the store was dim and cramped. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned goods, dry beans, flour, tools. Everything covered in a thin layer of dust. The man went behind a counter. "Name's Pruitt. I run this place." "Appreciate it," Cade said, not offering his own name. Pruitt noticed. His eyes flicked to Mara, then back to Cade. "Where you headed?" "East." "That's a direction, not a destination." "It's all you're getting." Pruitt smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Fair enough. What do you need?" They bought what they could afford: hardtack, dried meat, coffee, matches. Pruitt wrapped it all in brown paper, tied it with string, set it on the counter. "Anything else?" "Horses," Cade said. "You know anyone selling?" "Might. What happened to yours?" "Lost them in the mountains." "How do you lose 2 horses?" "Carefully." Pruitt laughed, short and sharp. "You're a funny man." He leaned on the counter. "Henderson, 2 miles north, sometimes has animals for sale. Don't know if he's got anything right now, but you could ask." "Appreciate it." Cade paid, coins that left his pockets almost empty, and gathered the supplies. Mara had been standing near the door the whole time, watching the road through the window. As they turned to leave, Pruitt spoke again. "You two wouldn't happen to be the couple the sheriff's looking for, would you?" Cade froze. Beside him, Mara's hand moved toward her rifle. "What sheriff?" Cade asked carefully. "Taggart, out of the county seat. Sent word around yesterday. Said he's looking for a man and woman, traveling together, possibly armed. Didn't say what for, but he's offering a reward for information." "What kind of reward?" $20. Cade's mind raced. $20 was a lot of money for a man running a failing general store in the middle of nowhere. Enough to make him ask questions, enough to make him remember. "Well," Cade said slowly, "we're not who you're looking for. We're just passing through." "Sure you are." Pruitt smiled again. "But even if you were, I wouldn't say anything. Sheriff Taggart and I don't see eye to eye on certain matters. Whatever you did, I figure it's your business." Cade couldn't tell if he was lying. Couldn't tell if the moment they walked out that door, Pruitt would be sending word. "Thanks for the supplies," Cade said. "Don't mention it, literally." Pruitt winked. "Safe travels." They left. Outside, the sun was setting, throwing long shadows across the road. The man who'd been whittling was gone. The settlement felt emptier than it had when they'd arrived. "You believe him?" Mara asked quietly. "No. Me neither." "How fast can you walk?" "Fast enough." They headed north toward where Pruitt had said this Henderson might have horses. But they didn't take the road. They cut east instead, looping wide, putting distance between themselves and the settlement. By the time full dark fell, they were 3 miles away and still moving. They didn't stop until they found a stand of cottonwoods near a dry wash. Cade's feet were bleeding now, blisters broken and raw. Mara limped from something she wasn't talking about. They made camp without fire again, ate the food they'd just bought, drank the water sparingly. "Taggart spread the word," Mara said. "That means Schaefer knows we're still alive." "Probably knew already. Those riders would have reported back." "So what do we do?" Cade looked at the metal box sitting between them. We stop running. We go straight to the capital. No more detours, no more trying to find horses. We just walk fast as we can, and we get this to someone who can actually do something with it. That's still 2 days' walk, maybe 3. Then we walk for 3 days. They'll be watching the roads. So we don't use the roads. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. All right, we go straight through. But Cade, if they catch us, they won't. But if they do, you take the box and run. Don't wait for me. Don't try to fight. Just run. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. This is bigger than both of us. Bigger than your ranch, bigger than my father, bigger than anything we want personally. She met his eyes. Promise me. Cade wanted to argue, wanted to say they'd both make it or neither would. But looking at her face, at the absolute conviction there, he couldn't. I promise, he lied. They took turns sleeping. The night was cold and long. Cade's watch passed in silence, broken only by the wind and the occasional howl of something distant. When dawn came, they were already moving. The land changed as they traveled. The scrubland gave way to grassland, then to cultivated fields. They passed farms staying well off the roads, cutting through unharvested corn and along fence lines. Once they saw riders in the distance, 3 of them, moving slowly, searching. Cade and Mara dropped into an irrigation ditch and waited, water soaking their clothes until the riders passed. They're everywhere, Mara whispered. Then we go around everywhere. By the second day, Cade's legs felt like wood. Every step was mechanical, thoughtless. He'd stopped feeling the blisters on his feet. Either they'd healed or he'd gone numb. He didn't care which. Mara kept pace beside him, silent and focused. Whatever pain she was in, she buried it deep. They ran out of food that afternoon. The water lasted until evening. After that, they had nothing. There's a creek, Mara said, checking her father's notebook. Should be a mile ahead. Should be? The map's old. The creek was there, but it was barely running. They filled the canteen with muddy water, drank it anyway. That night, they didn't sleep, just kept walking, using the stars to navigate. The land rolled and dipped, and in the darkness, it was impossible to see hazards. Twice Cade tripped, went down hard, got up and kept going. Mara fell once too. Didn't make a sound, just pushed herself up and continued. As the third dawn broke, they crested a rise and saw it. The capital. It wasn't much. A town of maybe 2,000, built around a central square. But it had a courthouse, a land office, and most importantly, it had federal authority. There, Mara said, pointing to a building on the edge of town. A sign over the door read, Territorial Land Office. They'd made it. But as they started down the slope toward town, Cade saw something that made his blood go cold. Horses. A dozen of them, tied up outside the land office. And standing on the steps, talking to a man in a suit, was Franklin Schaefer. Cade grabbed Mara, pulled her down behind a boulder. What? She hissed. Look. She looked. Her face went pale. He's here. He knew we'd come here. Or he's making sure that if we do, we don't get far. They watched. Schaefer was talking animatedly, gesturing. The man in the suit nodded, looked concerned. Money changed hands. Cade couldn't see how much, but enough that the man's demeanor changed from concerned to cooperative. He's buying them, Mara said. The land office clerk. He's buying him. So we can't go there. Then where? Cade thought fast. There had to be another way. Another authority they could appeal to. The courthouse, he said. Territorial judge. If we can get to him directly. Schaefer will have people watching that too. Probably, but it's all we've got. They circled wide, staying in the outskirts of town. The streets were waking up, shopkeepers opening, wagons moving, people starting their day. Cade and Mara looked like hell, and they knew it. Dirty, torn clothes, faces gaunt from days without proper food. They'd stand out. We need to clean up, Mara said. Look presentable. Otherwise they'll throw us out before we can say a word. Where? She pointed to a boarding house. There. We get a room, wash up, make ourselves look like people worth listening to. With what money? Mara reached into her coat, pulled out a small purse. Cade hadn't known she had it. Emergency fund, she said. My father always kept one. I kept the tradition. They paid for a room, one night, though they wouldn't stay that long. The landlady gave them a suspicious look, but took their money and handed over a key. Upstairs, the room was small and plain. A bed, a washstand, a cracked mirror. Cade looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized what he saw. 3 days of beard, face burned from sun and wind, eyes hollow from exhaustion. He washed as best he could with the basin of water provided, changed into the one clean shirt he'd been carrying in his pack. It was wrinkled, but it was better than what he'd been wearing. Mara did the same in the corner, turning her back for modesty. When she turned around, she looked almost respectable. Hair combed back, face clean, dress straightened. "Ready?" she asked. "No, but let's go anyway." The courthouse was 3 blocks away. They walked quickly, but not frantically. Tried to look like people who belonged. The building was brick, 2 stories, with columns out front that were meant to look impressive, but just looked pretentious. Cade had been here once before, years ago, for a land dispute that had been settled before it went to trial. They climbed the steps. A deputy stood at the door, young, bored, picking at his teeth with a splinter. "Help you?" he asked. "We need to see the territorial judge," Cade said. "He's in session. Won't be free until this afternoon." "It's urgent." "It always is." The deputy didn't move. "You can wait inside if you want. Clerk will get your names." They went inside. The interior was cooler, darker. A long hallway stretched to the back of the building, doors on both sides, most closed. At the end, a set of double doors stood open, revealing a courtroom. A clerk sat at a desk near the entrance. He looked up as they approached. "Names?" "Cade Rourke. Mara Rourke." The clerk wrote it down. "Nature of business?" "Land fraud. Document forgery. We have evidence of widespread corruption in the county records." That got his attention. He looked up, studied them more carefully. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious crime." "You have proof?" Mara set the metal box on the desk. "Right here." The clerk stared at it. "I'll need to verify." The double doors at the end of the hall opened. A man in a black robe emerged, the judge, Cade assumed. He was older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be impressed by anything. "What's the commotion?" he asked. The clerk stood. "Your Honor, these folks are claiming land fraud. They say they have evidence." The judge looked at Cade, then at Mara, then at the box. "What kind of evidence?" "Original survey records," Mara said, "proving that land boundaries across the county have been altered, water rights stolen, documents forged." The judge's expression didn't change. "Bold claim. It's true." "Many true things are bold. Doesn't mean they're provable in court." He started to turn away. "My name is Mara Harrow," she said loudly. The judge stopped. "My father was James Harrow, county surveyor. He was killed 3 years ago trying to expose this. Before he died, he hid the proof. I found it, and now I'm here to make sure his death meant something." The silence stretched. Then the judge walked back, looked at the box again. "Open it." Mara did. The judge pulled out papers one by one, studied them. His expression shifted, not much, but enough. Surprise, then concern, then something that might have been anger. "Where did you get these?" "My father's notes led me to them. They were hidden in the mountains." "And you're certain they're authentic?" "They're in my father's handwriting. They match his survey marks. And they contradict every official record filed with the county office." The judge set the papers down carefully. "This is substantial. If true, this represents criminal conspiracy at multiple levels of government." "It's true," Cade said, "and the people responsible know we have this. They've been hunting us for days trying to get it back." "Who's responsible?" "The county clerk, the land office director, Sheriff Taggart." Cade paused. "And Franklin Schaefer, president of Cattlemen's Bank." The judge's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation against a prominent businessman." "He's standing outside the land office right now," Mara said, "paying off the clerk, making sure that if we brought this evidence there, it would disappear." The judge looked toward the front of the building, like he could see through the walls. "You're asking me to believe there's a coordinated effort to steal land and that it involves multiple officials. I'm asking you to look at the evidence and decide for yourself." Another long silence. Then the judge gathered the papers, put them back in the box, and closed the lid. I'm taking possession of this, as evidence in a territorial investigation. You believe us? Mara asked. I believe these documents deserve examination. Whether that examination supports your claims remains to be seen. He handed the box to the clerk. Lock this in my chambers. No one touches it without my direct authorization. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned back to Cade and Mara. You two will need to provide sworn testimony, detailed accounts of how you obtained this, what you know about the alleged fraud, and who you believe is involved. When? Cade asked. Now, before anyone knows you're here. He led them into his chambers, a small office lined with law books and smelling of pipe tobacco. They spent the next 2 hours answering questions, telling their story, signing statements. By the time they finished, Cade's hand was cramped from writing and his throat was dry from talking. The judge read over their statements, signed and sealed them, then looked up. I'm ordering an immediate audit of county land records. Federal marshals will be dispatched to secure the courthouse and prevent any destruction of evidence. And I'm issuing warrants for the arrest of everyone you've named. Including Schaefer? Mara asked. Including Schaefer. He's still outside the land office. The judge smiled, cold and thin. Then he won't be hard to find. He called for the deputy, gave orders quickly and quietly. The deputy's eyes went wide, but he nodded and left at a run. You two should stay here, the judge said. Until we've secured the situation, you're not safe on the streets. How long will that take? An hour, maybe less. They waited in the chambers, sat in silence, too exhausted to talk, too wired to relax. Through the window, Cade could see the street, watched as deputies mounted up, rode out in formation, watched as people stopped to stare, wondering what was happening. Then he saw them arrive at the land office. Schaefer was still there, still talking, still smiling, still confident that the world worked the way he'd arranged it. The deputies surrounded him. Schaefer's smile died. He argued. Cade could see him gesturing, pointing, trying to intimidate. But the deputies didn't back down. One of them produced a paper, showed it to Schaefer. The warrant. Schaefer's face went white, then red. Then he tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before they grabbed him, pulled his arms behind his back, locked him in irons. Cade watched them load Schaefer into a wagon, watched the man who'd tried to steal his land, who'd burned his barn, who'd sent men to kill them in the mountains, get driven away in chains. It felt unreal, like something that couldn't possibly be happening. Is it over? Mara asked quietly. I don't know. But when the judge came back an hour later, his expression had changed. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something harder. The land office clerk confessed, he said. Named names, provided dates, confirmed most of what you told me. We've arrested 6 people so far. Expect more. What happens now? Cade asked. Now the territorial government conducts a full investigation. Every land transfer in the county for the last 5 years gets reviewed. Forged documents get thrown out. Real boundaries get restored. He paused. It'll take months, maybe years. But the truth is on record now. It can't be buried again. Mara's shoulders sagged. Relief, exhaustion, grief, all of it hitting at once. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. You did this. You and your father. The judge looked at the metal box sitting on his desk. He'd be proud. She nodded, unable to speak. The judge cleared his throat. You're free to go, but I'd recommend staying in town for a few days. You'll likely need to testify when we begin formal hearings. We will, Cade said. They left the courthouse together, stepped out into afternoon sunlight that felt different somehow. Brighter, cleaner. The street was busy with people talking, speculating, spreading news of the arrests. Cade heard Schaefer's name mentioned more than once, always with shock, sometimes with satisfaction. What now? Mara asked. Now we get the kids. Go home. Cade looked at her. Figure out what's left of the ranch once they redraw the lines. You might get land back. Or I might lose more. Either way, it'll be honest. They walked towards the boarding house to collect what little they had, past the bank where Schaefer had worked. The door was locked, a notice posted. Temporarily closed pending investigation. Cade couldn't help but smile. At the boarding house, they paid for another night. This time, they'd actually use it. Cade fell onto the bed fully clothed and was asleep in seconds. When he woke, it was dark outside. Mara sat by the window looking out at the street, the metal box in her lap. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet." He sat up, rubbed his face. "What are you thinking about?" "My father. About whether this is what he wanted. Whether it was worth it." "Was it?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Ask me in a year. When the dust settles. When we see if the truth actually changes anything." "It will." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here. Because you didn't give up. Because men like Schaefer are in chains and men like your father are remembered." He stood, crossed to the window, stood beside her. "That's worth something." She looked up at him. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what the hell were we doing out there?" She almost smiled. "Trying not to die, mostly." "That too." They stood together looking out at the quiet street, at the town that didn't know it yet but was about to change. And for the first time in days, Cade felt something like peace. The aftermath came slower than Cade expected. He'd hoped maybe, that once the arrests were made and the truth was on record, everything would snap back into place. Justice served, case closed, life returns to normal. It didn't work that way. They stayed in the capital for a week while the territorial government assembled its case. Cade testified twice, Mara 3 times. They answered the same questions over and over, signed more documents, sat in rooms while lawyers argued about jurisdiction and procedure. On the 4th day, word came from the Henderson place. Sarah and Danny were fine, but Sarah was asking when they were coming back. "Tell her soon," Cade had said, but soon kept stretching. Finally, on the 8th day, the territorial prosecutor told them they could leave. The investigation would continue, but their part was done. They'd be called back when the trial started, but that could be months away. Cade bought 2 horses with the last of Mara's emergency fund. Not good horses. One was too old, the other too green, but they'd get them home. They left at dawn, before the capital woke up, before anyone could stop them with more questions. The ride back took 3 days. They didn't push hard, didn't have the energy for it. Just rode steady, camped at night, talked less than they probably should have. On the 2nd night, sitting by a small fire, Mara finally asked the question Cade had been waiting for. "What happens when we get back?" "We pick up the kids. Go home." "And then?" "Then we wait. See what the land audit says. See how much of the ranch is actually mine and how much was stolen." "What if you lose more than you gain?" Cade poked the fire with a stick. Sparks rose and died. "Then I lose it. But at least I'll know the truth." "That doesn't bother you?" "It bothers me, but not as much as living on a lie." He looked at her across the flames. "What about you? What happens next for Mara Harrow?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I've spent 3 years running, hiding, protecting those documents. Now they're with the territorial government, and I'm just here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that." "You could stay." "At the ranch?" "It's your home too now. Legally, anyway." She smiled, but it was sad. A marriage of convenience doesn't make something a home. "No, but time might, if you give it a chance." She didn't answer, just stared into the fire, thinking thoughts she didn't share. They reached the Henderson place late on the 3rd day. The house sat warm and yellow in the dusk, lamplight glowing in the windows. Before Cade could even dismount, the door flew open and Danny came running out. "Uncle Cade!" The boy hit him like a cannonball. Cade nearly fell off his horse but managed to catch him, swing him down, hold on tight. "Hey buddy, miss me?" "You were gone forever." "I know. I'm sorry." Sarah appeared in the doorway. She didn't run, just stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. Martha Henderson came out behind her, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. You two look like you've been through a war." "Something like that," Cade said. "Come inside, I've got stew on." They ate at Martha's table, the 4 of them plus Martha and her husband Tom. The stew was thick and good, the bread fresh. Cade ate 3 bowls and still felt hungry. Danny talked non-stop, telling them everything that had happened while they were gone. He'd helped feed the chickens, learned to milk a cow, found a bird's nest with 4 eggs. Sarah said nothing, just picked at her food and watched Mara with eyes that gave nothing away. After dinner, Martha pulled Cade aside. "That girl of yours been asking questions," she said quietly. "What kind of questions?" "Where you went, what you were doing, whether you were coming back." Martha glanced toward the other room where Sarah sat. "She's scared, Cade. Won't say it, but she is. Thinks everyone who leaves her dies." "I know. She needs to hear you're staying." "I am staying." "Then tell her, and mean it when you say it." Cade found Sarah on the porch, sitting on the steps, looking out at the dark. He sat down beside her. She didn't move away, but she didn't look at him either. "I'm sorry I was gone so long," he said. "You said a few days." "I know. It was 8. I know." "You lied." Cade took a breath. "Yeah, I did. And I'm sorry." "Why'd you go?" "Because some people were doing bad things, stealing land, hurting families, and we had proof they were doing it." "You could have died." "We could have, but we didn't." "But you could have." Her voice cracked. "Just like Mama and Papa. Just like everyone." Cade put his arm around her shoulders. This time she didn't pull away. "Sarah, I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise I won't die someday. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere by choice. I'm here, I'm staying, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you and Danny are safe." "What about her?" "Mara? Is she staying too?" "I don't know. That's up to her." Sarah was quiet. Then she said, "She told me you were doing this for us. When you left, she said you were trying to protect us." "She was right. I was mean to her." "Yeah, you were." "I should apologize." "Yeah, you should." Sarah nodded, didn't say anything else, just leaned against him, and Cade held her while the stars came out. They rode back to the ranch the next morning, all 4 of them on 2 horses, Cade and Danny on one, Mara and Sarah on the other. It was cramped and awkward, but nobody complained. The ranch looked the same as they'd left it. House still standing, barn still scarred from the fire, fence lines still needing work. But something felt different, like the weight that had been pressing down on it was gone. Or maybe that was just Cade, finally able to breathe. They unloaded, settled the horses, carried supplies inside. Danny ran off to check on his fort in the hayloft. Sarah hesitated at the door, then turned to Mara. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for being mean." Mara looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I do. You didn't do anything wrong, and I treated you bad." Sarah's voice was steady, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing. "So, I'm sorry." "Apology accepted." Sarah nodded, then went inside. Mara stood on the porch, looking like she didn't quite know what had just happened. "She's a tough nut," Cade said. "But once she decides you're all right, she's loyal to the bone." "She decided I'm all right?" "Seems like." "Huh." Mara almost smiled. "That's unexpected." The days fell into a rhythm after that. Cade worked the ranch, fixing what had broken while they were gone, checking the cattle, riding fence lines. Mara kept house, cooked meals, taught Danny how to read better, and Sarah how to make bread that didn't come out like rocks. It was normal, quiet, almost boring. Cade had never been so grateful for boring in his life. 3 weeks after they got back, a rider came from the capital. Official territorial business, sealed envelope, delivered directly to Cade. He opened it standing in the yard, Mara watching from the porch. It was the land audit report. He read it twice to make sure he understood. Then he walked up to the porch and handed it to Mara. "What does it say?" she asked. "The south pasture wasn't mine. 30 acres, transferred illegally after my brother died. They're giving it back to the Patterson family. How much does that leave you?" 170 acres, less than I thought I had, more than I was afraid I'd have left. "Is that enough?" "It'll have to be." But there was more in the envelope. A second letter, this one from the Territorial Bank Commission. It informed him that his loan had been reviewed and found to contain illegal clauses. The water rights provision was void. His debt had been recalculated at the original amount, with fair interest, and a new payment schedule established. He could afford it, barely, but he could afford it. "They fixed it," he said quietly. "Not all of it, but some of it." Mara read both letters, then looked up at him. "Your land is really yours now." "Yeah." "No forged signatures, no stolen water, no lies." "No lies." She handed the letters back. "That's good." It is. They stood there for a moment, not quite looking at each other. The trial starts in 2 months, Cade said. Wes, we'll have to go back to testify. I know. After that, he trailed off, not sure how to finish. After that, what? After that, you're free. You've done what you set out to do. Your father's name will be cleared. The men who killed him will face justice. You don't have to stay here anymore. Mara leaned against the porch post. Is that you telling me to leave? No, it's me telling you that you can, if you want to. And if I don't want to, then you stay. As what? Your wife in name only? Your housekeeper? Cade didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know what he was offering or what she was asking for. Sarah saved him by bursting out the door. There's a wagon coming. They all looked. Sure enough, dust rising on the road, a wagon approaching. It was Tom Henderson. He pulled up to the house, climbed down, handed Cade a folded newspaper. Thought you'd want to see this, Tom said. The paper was from the territorial capital, 3 days old. The headline read, Banking Official Convicted in Land Fraud Scheme. Below it was a picture, crude but recognizable, of Franklin Schaefer in chains. Cade read the article. Schaefer had been found guilty on 14 counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. 6 other officials had been convicted alongside him. More trials were pending. It's really over, Mara said, reading over his shoulder. Yeah. Tom shifted his weight. Martha wanted me to invite you folks to dinner on Sunday. If you're free. We're free, Cade said. Good. She's making roast. Tom climbed back onto his wagon. Oh, and Cade, folks in the valley been talking about what you did. Standing up to Schaefer, exposing the fraud. Some of them want to say thank you. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, but you're getting it anyway. Tom tipped his hat and drove off. Sarah was grinning. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who didn't want to lose his land. That's what heroes say, Danny piped up from the doorway. Cade looked at Mara. She was smiling, really smiling, for maybe the first time since he'd met her. Don't let it go to your head, she said. Too late. I'm already planning a statue. She laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was so unexpected that even Sarah stared. That night, after the kids were in bed, Cade and Mara sat on the porch like they had that first night. But this time felt different, easier. I've been thinking, Mara said. About? About staying. Cade's heart did something complicated in his chest. Yeah? Not as your housekeeper, not as your wife in name only. She looked at him. As your actual wife. If you're willing. Willing? Mara, He stopped, started again. Why? Because the last month has been the realest thing I've done in 3 years. Because those kids need someone who will fight for them the way I've been fighting for my father's memory. Because this place is broken and hard and barely surviving, and somehow that feels right. She paused. And because you're a good man, Cade Rourke. Stubborn and frustrating, and you lie to your niece when you should tell her the truth. But you're good. And I'd like to build something real with someone good. Cade couldn't speak for a moment. When he found his voice, it came out rough. I'm not easy to live with. Neither am I. This ranch is going to be hard work, every day, for years. I know. And I've got 2 kids who need raising, who might not always like you, who'll test you every chance they get. I'm counting on it. And there's no guarantee any of this works. We might fail, lose the land anyway, end up with nothing. We might. Mara reached over, took his hand. But we might not, and I'd rather try and fail with you than succeed alone. Cade looked at their hands, fingers intertwined, calloused from work, scarred from the mountains, real. All right, he said. Let's try. That's it? Just all right? What do you want? A speech? A little romance wouldn't kill you. He turned to face her properly. Mara Harrow, you're the stubbornest, most frustrating woman I've ever met. You nearly got me killed at least 3 times. You threw away evidence we almost died for, and you can't make coffee worth a damn. Is this supposed to be romantic? I'm getting there. He squeezed her hand. You're also the bravest person I know. You stood up when you could have run. You fought when you could have quit. and you saw something in this broken-down ranch and this broken-down man that was worth staying for. So yeah, I want to try. I want to build something real with you." She smiled. "That was better. Don't let it go to your head." Too late. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable now, knowing. "We should probably tell the kids," Cade said eventually. "We should. Sarah's going to have opinions. Sarah always has opinions. And Danny's going to ask 1,000 questions. We'll answer them." Cade nodded. "Tomorrow. We'll tell them tomorrow." Coward? Absolutely. The trial happened in late fall. Cade and Mara traveled back to the capital, together this time, with proper supplies and horses that didn't collapse halfway through the journey. They testified for 3 days, answered questions from lawyers in suits who tried to make them sound confused or unreliable. It didn't work. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and came back with guilty verdicts across the board. In the courthouse hallway afterward, a man approached them. Older, gray-haired, carrying himself like someone who'd spent his life outdoors. "Mr. Rourke?" "Mrs. Rourke." "Yes?" "Name's Patterson. You don't know me, but you gave me back my land. The south pasture that was stolen from my father." He held out his hand. "I wanted to say thank you." Cade shook it. "You don't have to thank us." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." Patterson glanced at Mara. "Your father was a good man, ma'am. He did right by a lot of people, including mine." Mara's eyes went bright. She nodded, unable to speak. Patterson tipped his hat and left. "You all right?" Cade asked quietly. "Yeah." She wiped her eyes. "Yeah, I'm all right." They rode home the next day, took their time, stopped at the same seep where they'd nearly died of thirst, filled their canteens, kept going. When they crested the last rise and saw the ranch spread out below, Cade pulled his horse to a stop. "It's smaller than it was," he said. "The land, I mean. 30 acres gone. Water rights cut back. It's not what I thought I'd be leaving to those kids." "No," Mara agreed. "It's better." "How do you figure?" "Because it's honest. Because they won't inherit a lie. Because when they're grown and someone asks them where they come from, they can say they come from something real." She looked at him. "That's worth more than 30 acres. Cade thought about that, about Sarah and Danny growing up here, working this land, learning that truth mattered more than profit, and that sometimes the right thing was the hard thing. "Yeah," he said. "I guess it is." They rode down together. Sarah and Danny were waiting in the yard, along with Martha Henderson, who'd been staying with them. The kids ran to meet them, shouting questions and news, and demanding to know if they'd brought presents. "No presents," Cade said, "but we won." "Won what?" Danny asked. "Everything that mattered." That night they had dinner together. All of them around the table, Cade and Mara, Sarah and Danny, Martha, who stayed because they insisted. The food was simple, the conversation loud. Someone knocked over a glass and someone else laughed, and it was messy and imperfect and exactly right. After Martha left and the kids went to bed, Cade walked the property line, checking fence posts, making mental notes of repairs needed before winter. Mara joined him halfway around. Can't stop working even for one night? Habit. Bad one. Probably. They walked together in silence. The stars were bright overhead, the air sharp with coming cold. Winter would be hard. It always was. But they'd face it. "I was thinking," Mara said, "about names." "What about them?" "I've been Mara Hale for 3 years. Before that, Mara Harrow. But I've never really been Mara Rourke. Not in the way that matters. You want to change it back?" "No. I want to choose it. For real this time, not because a banker said I had to or because I needed to hide. But because I want to." Cade stopped walking. "You sure?" "I'm sure. It's just a name." "No. It's a choice, and I'm choosing you, this place, this life." She looked at the house, warm with lamplight. "All of it." Cade pulled her close. She came easily, fitting against him like she'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. "Welcome home, Mara Rourke." "Thank you, Cade Rourke." They stood there for a while, holding each other, looking at what they'd built and what they'd saved and what they'd chosen. The land was smaller. The truth was bigger. And the life they were building wasn't perfect or easy or anything like what either of them had imagined. But it was theirs. Honest and hard-won and real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in November, heavy and thick, covering the valley in white. Kate and Mara worked through it, feeding cattle, breaking ice on water troughs, keeping the house warm, and the kids fed. Sarah learned to cook without burning everything. Danny learned to handle a rifle without shooting his own foot. They fought and laughed, and drove each other crazy and slowly became something like a family. In the spring, Mara planted a garden. Vegetables, mostly, but also flowers. She said the house needed color. Cade said it needed a new roof more, but he didn't argue. The flowers bloomed in May, bright and defiant against the harsh landscape. My father would have liked this, Mara said one morning, kneeling in the dirt, hands deep in soil. Yeah? He always said the hardest places grow the strongest things. Cade looked at her, at this woman who'd survived loss and betrayal in 3 years of running, who'd chosen to stop running and start building, who'd turned a marriage of convenience into something real. He was right, Cade said. She smiled up at him, dirt on her face, hair coming loose from its tie. Yeah, she said. He was. The territorial government finished its land review that summer. 143 families received their stolen land back. Water rights were redistributed fairly. The county hired new officials, ones who weren't on anyone's payroll. It wasn't perfect. Some families had lost too much to recover. Some wounds were too deep to heal completely. But it was better. And better was enough. Cade stood at his property line one evening, looking at the fence he'd just repaired. It was straight now. Honest. Marking land that was truly his. Behind him, he heard laughter from the house. Sarah teaching Danny how to dance, probably. They'd been at it for an hour, stumbling and laughing and making noise. Mara appeared beside him. Supper's ready. I'll be there in a minute. She didn't leave. Just stood with him, looking at the fence, at the land beyond it. You ever regret it? Cade asked. Staying here? This life? Every day, she said. He looked at her, surprised. I regret that my father isn't here to see it. I regret the years I spent running instead of standing. I regret that it took almost dying in the mountains to find something worth living for. She took his hand. But I don't regret choosing you, or this place, or this family. Those are the only choices I've ever made that didn't come with regret attached. Cade pulled her close, kissed her forehead. I love you. I know. That's it? I finally say it, and you just say I know? What do you want, a speech? He laughed. A little romance wouldn't kill you. She turned to face him, eyes bright. I love you too, Cade Rourke. You're stubborn, and you work too hard, and you still can't dance worth a damn. But you're mine, and I'm yours. And that's all the romance I need. That was pretty good. I practiced. They walked back to the house together, toward the noise and the light and the life they'd chosen. The land was smaller than Cade had once thought. The ranch would never be what it was in his brother's time. The work would always be hard, and the winters would always be brutal, and nothing about this life would ever be easy. But it was honest, built on truth instead of lies, on choices instead of circumstances, on people who'd decided to stand instead of run. And when Sarah and Danny were grown, when they told their own children the story of how this family survived, they wouldn't have to leave anything out. They could tell the whole truth, about a man who married a stranger to save his land, about a woman who carried her father's secrets through fire and bullets and mountains, about how they almost died protecting the truth, and how they lived because they refused to let lies win. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect enough.